Hey everyone, and welcome back to my course on Docker. In this video we are going to be going over the Dockerfile. The Dockerfile is used to create your own image. You will also see them a lot if you ever look at projects in GitHub. If there's a Dockerfile included after you watch this video, you'll now be able to read that Dockerfile and even make changes or tweaks if you want to change that image. So please join me here. I'm in Visual Studio Code. Let's get a Dockerfile created. So I'm going to start by just right-clicking this Lab 6 folder, and I'm going to go New File, and I'm going to give it the name of Dockerfile. And for those that are following along, you should name your file Dockerfile as well, because when we go to build this image, it's going to look in the current directory, and it's going to look for a file named Dockerfile. So just make sure you have it named the same. Okay, so we're in here now. The first line that should be in the Dockerfile is the from command. So we're going to put from, and you can see that I have some context sensitive help here, and that's because I have the Docker extension installed for Visual Studio Code. If you're using an IDE, I recommend Visual Studio. It's my favorite IDE. And as you can see, there's tons of extensions on here that are really helpful. So it says from base image. So it's asking me which image I want to use. So I'm going to use the Ubuntu 14.04 image that we've been using. So I'll just put Ubuntu 14.04. And basically this says, go grab this image for the base image, and now we're going to put everything else that we're going to add on top of this base image. So the next thing that you usually do in a Dockerfile after you determine the base image that you're going to use is to start building the layers on top of that image. And the first thing I do is I run updates. So I use the command run. And when you use the parameter run, it lets you use a command, like an operating system command. So the command I'm going to use is apt-get, and I'm going to do an update. Then I'm going to run another command, and I'm going to get some software here. So I'm going to say apt-get install python3.pip, or -pip. And then I want this to be a Flask web server, so I'm going to say run pip3 install Flask. And for those of you that don't know, Flask is a lightweight web framework for Python. So I have my base image here, and then I have the 3 update commands. Let's go ahead and run this. Alright, so I'm in my terminal where my Dockerfile is. If I do an ls, I can see my Dockerfile there, and if I cat it out, I can see the lines of code that I put in there. So it's going to grab this image, then it's going to run these 3 commands. And to actually build this image, I'm going to use the docker image build, and then I'm going to put a period to indicate the present working directory. And what this will do is it'll look in this directory for a Dockerfile. So it's going to find this, and then it's going to build this new image. So I'll go ahead and run this command, but spoiler alert, we're going to run into an error. But I think it's good that we're going to see what this error is. So it's going through all the updates, and oh, that happened a lot quicker than I expected. I think there's a little bit of caching happening. But we got to the portion where it was installing Python. Here, let me scroll up. So it grabbed the image, and then it did the apt update, and it used the cache because I built it before. And then it got to step 3 of 4, which was apt-get install python3-pip. And you can see that it was looking through the dependency trees and all that. And then it failed for some reason. You can see that it failed because it was asking for some input. It wanted yes or no to continue. But since the image was being built by Docker and it doesn't allow us to give in any input during that process, it just fails out at this point. So this is actually a very easy fix. I'm going to hop it back into the code editor here, and I'm just going to add the -y parameter to all these. Actually, I don't need it here because I know the update passed, but these two, I think it's going to ask me yes or no. So I'm going to do a -yes, a -yes. So basically, for the apt-get install command and for the pip install, sometimes it asks you, are you sure, if you want to confirm, yada yada yada. If you put -yes, basically you can walk away from the install and go grab a beer or whatever. So let's hop back in here, and I'm going to rebuild this image, but I'm actually going to add an additional parameter here, which is -t, and I'm going to give it a new image name, just because I forgot to do that last time. So now when I build it, it's actually going to build the image as Ubuntu Flask, and it'll be a new image in my image list, but I'm leaving everything else the same. And this new part should pass now because we have the -y, so it should get past the portion where we failed at, and it looks like it has. I remember it failing around this area. So I'll speed up the video. Alright, so we can see it failed on that installing Flask thing. I guess it didn't need that -y there for the pip. So let's fix that. And it's all about these little happy mistakes that help us learn here. So that's took that out, that's saved. I'm going to rerun it. Rerun the Docker build. And you're going to see that it's going to skip past all the way up to step 4 because everything has been cached. So that's one of the amazing features of Docker. Things get cached. It doesn't have to, it sort of knows where it left off. So looks like our image is built. Perfect. And now if we do a docker image ls, we can see that Flask image. And let's do a docker inspect, which we did in a previous video, and inspect our image. So we'll do Ubuntu Flask. Ooh, I actually want to do let's do docker image ls again. I actually wanted to do a docker image history, and it will give us the history of this image. And we'll do Ubuntu Flask, and you can see the history of this image. So does this look familiar to anyone? If you look at this here, you can see that this is the exact image ID of this one. So the first layer is the base image, which is Ubuntu 14.04. Then we started adding in the layers of our Dockerfile. So you can see what's been layered on top. So what has been layered on top? Well, we did the apt-get update command. We did the install Python 3 command. And then we installed Flask. So everything was done on a layer. So that gives us a very good history of what this image has been through. So let's go back into our Dockerfile and let's do some more options. So let's start by giving it some environment variables. So I'm just going to do env, and I'm going to do home, and I'm going to say /home. I want this lowercase. So that looks fine. So that's the environment variable that I'm specifying. The next thing I want to do is I want to use the copy command. So you can see copy and then source and then destination. So the source is going to be from my Docker server, and the destination is going to be the directory on the container. So let's copy over the Flask app, because I have a folder named Flask app, and let's move that to /home /flask app. So we got an environment variable set. Now we're copying over a folder. Another thing that is very common to do in a Docker file is to expose some ports. So let's put port 5000 because the Flask framework listens on port 5000 when you start up Flask. So we'll do that. Another thing I do is the stop signal. So this is basically when you're in the container and you want to shut it down, you can do like Control-C, any type of like signal kill command. This is what it's listening for. So I'm just going to put in stop signal, sig term. This isn't something that you guys need to remember or anything. Just when you see it, that's what it means. Let's add in a work directory, and let's make it the home/Flask app. So the work directory is basically the directory that the container is going to start in. So like if you were to open a bash shell on the container, this is the directory that it would be in. So if you were to run docker exec ls, it would list out the directory of this. If you were to run the flask command, it would look in this directory for all the Flask files. So it's the current working directory. So we have that. And the last two things I'm going to do is entry point, and it wants an executable. And then I'm going to put command. So a lot of people get these two confused, but they're very different. So this first one is reserved for the process that the container is going to run. So you always want this to be your primary process. If this process dies, the container goes down. So in our application, we want Python 3 to be the entry point. And I'm going to do a few commands after we get this image up just to show what the entry point is. But basically, it's always the application that you want running in the container. So we're going to put Python 3, and we're going to put this syntax here because it could be, you could have multiple things in there. It is a list. And the next thing is command, and these are actually the arguments that your entry point has. So we want Python 3, and then we want it to run our app.py. So this is the equivalent of typing Python 3 app.py. And you got to spell Python right, but basically it's telling the container to run this command in this working directory. Perfect. So let's delete that. This Dockerfile looks good to me. So we have it all saved up. Let's hop into our terminal, clear the screen, and I'm going to rerun that command to build it. So we docker image build, we gave it a name, and we're looking in this directory. Let me get this in my clipboard. And I'm going to do an LSL. So you can see that Flask app in here. And you can see the app.py is in there. So remember, in our Docker file, we are copying over this directory, and then our entry point is going to be Python 3, and then it's going to reference this app.py. So yeah, just double checking that we had everything in place before we build the image, but I think we're ready to build it. And I lost that in my clipboard, so let's go back here. Okay, this is the command I want to run. Alright. Looks like we're golden, and you can see how fast that went. Alright, so it successfully went through all the steps. If you're following along, I hope you got through the same steps. If not, just look at which step it failed at and go look at your Docker file and make sure that it's consistent to what I had in mind. So you can see it did everything in here. And if we do docker image ls, we can see that this one was created 30 seconds ago. And if we do a Docker history, Ubuntu Flask, we can see, wow, there's a lot of stuff in there. So, it's everything we expected, right? We got the Python 3 install Flask, blah, 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 exposing ports, entry point, command. Alright, perfect. So we got a good idea of all the different layers that are on there. Let's start up a container using this. So to start a container, here, let me clear the screen. So to start a container, we're going to do docker run, and we'll do -d because we don't want to attach to it. And then let's give it a host name so we remember it, and we'll say webserve. Webserve1 will work, and we'll give it the same name because host name and the container name should be consistent. And then we're going to put -p and specify a port here, and we're going to map port 80 to port 5000. So this is the Docker server side and this is the container side. So port 80 on my local server here is mapping to port 5000 on the Docker container. And then now I'm going to specify that image that we just built, which is Ubuntu:/Flask. I'll hit enter. And I hear my computer making noises, which is always a good sign. If I do a docker ps, I can see that the output is all messy, so let me fix that. Do it again. Looks nice and clean for everyone here. And it did not start. So let's do -a. We can see it exited 30 seconds ago, so it looks like it tried to start, but it had some sort of issue. So let's clear this. Let's do a docker logs, and we're going to do webserve1. Okay, so a little troubleshooting for everyone here. It said Python 3 can't open file appy.py. No such file or directory. Appy.py. That doesn't look like what we had before when we looked at our Flask app. So let's look at that again. Ah, it's actually called app.py. So let's fix that in our Dockerfile. So we got our Dockerfile here. Instead of appy.py, let's call it app.py. Save it. Now we can't just restart the container. We actually need to rebuild the image. So let's rebuild the image. And I don't know if it's my command history, so I might have to just do it here. So docker image build -t, give it a name. And need the period to search for the Dockerfile. Alright, it looks like fixed that. It's now looking for app.py. Perfect. I'm going to do a docker remove webserve1 to get rid of that old container. Clear the screen. And then I'm going to look for that command that we have it here. So docker run -d hostname webserve1 name webserve1. We got the port mapping Ubuntu Flask. Alright, let's run it. Do docker ps. Okay, this looks more promising. We can see Ubuntu Flask. It's running this command, and we got the web server. Let's try to curl localhost. I can say, oh, Hello world, welcome to the Simple Flask website. Perfect. So we just built a container running the Flask web server from a Dockerfile from scratch. The only files we had in there were basically in this Flask app, and if we look at this file that I have, you can see that there's not much to it. You can grab it from my GitHub. Everything's in the description of this video. But it's pretty basic file. It's basically just returning hello world. And you could put in a full-fledged Flask application. And this is how quickly you could get a development environment up in Docker. So I hope that was helpful. With Docker files, you can do basically anything, and yeah, all your containers will be very consistent. So I hope this video was helpful. Docker files are very good. If you're working with Docker, any type of container application I make will always have a Docker file included with it. I never just do the basic Docker commands unless I'm troubleshooting or something like that. I always specify my containers in code. That way it's always consistent. It's easy to port them over to different environments and everything like that. So that's it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to be bringing up Docker Compose, which is basic. It's very similar to the Docker files, but you can have multiple Docker images and run an entire environment. You could have a database server, a web server, and an application server, all defined within a single Docker Compose file. So it's very similar to what we just did here, but it's also very powerful. So I hope you join me in the next video for Docker Compose. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.